Welcome back. You're still watching Daybreak on this 2nd of April 2024. And now joining us live from Dubai is the Agriculture Committee Chair at the National Assembly, that is Dr. John Mutunga. How are you, Dr.
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Great, and it's good to see you from the other side. I don't know what time it is there. How many? It's just an hour, isn't it?
It's an hour.
It's only 1 hour earlier than you.
Okay, so, all right. So talk to us about, I want us to start on the conversation about the fertilizer question in the country. And many farmers have complained that they are receiving the wrong fertilizer. The Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture says that, no, this is correct. It is quality fertilizer. The PS has said that he wants investigations done into a specific brand by Kel Chemicals. But at the same time, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, says that the buck stops with the NCPB and heads must roll. What exactly are we dealing with here, and has it concerned your committee?
Yeah, precisely. Thank you very much, Sam. It has indeed concerned my committee because we started investigations quite early, I think last week but one. We held our first meeting with the Kenya Bureau of Standards, who were able to explain the fact that they did analyze a sample of fertilizer from an institution, a company called SBL Innovate, which was supposed to have been an organic fertilizer, but then the company decided to distribute a totally different product through NCPB. Now, we had also invited the ministry, the NCPB and KEFIS to shed some light on issues. They were not able to see us then, and we have fixed the date for Monday. We will go to the depth of this because we need to know exactly what is happening. This particular fertilizer that SBL Innovate has been distributing through NCPB is not really a fertilizer. It is dolomite from Kariadushi. And they just pack and put in branded casings and distribute through NCPB. They have been selling it at 1,700 shillings across the country, and they have done this for a while. So there is fraudulence straight on. We have not met SBL Innovate. We will meet SBL Innovate after we are done with the ministry, because we will need to know the extent to which the ministry was involved, the kind of contract NCPB has with SBL Innovate, and also the kind of agreement, of course, distribution agreement, and how what convinced them that they are handling the correct product. However, looking at the product itself, because we took some time with Kenya Bureau of Standards, they were very, very clear that they analyzed a different product, which was organic, an organic fertilizer, and one of the components, or rather the key ingredients in an organic fertilizer, is that it must have more than 60% organic matter. This particular product does not have even 15%. It has very little organic matter. Now, on the other hand, we've heard of fertilizers distributing across the country which are not really, they are not of quality. And one of them that we are closely following is what was likely to be containing some stones, I understand. Mm-hmm. We are following that link to try and find out exactly who packaged this particular fertilizer, how did it get the market, what kind of, how much have they been able to distribute, and so on and so forth. But by and large, let me assure the Kenyan farmer that the government's intention was to basically give Kenyan a good fertilizer, and that has happened over the years. We have a few individuals or corporates who may have gone the wrong way to try and give Kenyans the wrong product, and we will make sure as a committee that we get to the depth of this matter. We will know exactly who has been involved, and we shall present a report to Parliament, which will be, I'm sure, will be adopted, and they will be put in.
Dr. You said that the fertilizer from SBL Innovate is it's fraudulent, you call it, but I understand that they have gone to court challenging that determination by the Kenya Bureau of Standards. So what exactly is the evidence that you would say was used to arrive at that position that you claim?
They were distributing a different product, which they are calling a CPC Original Plus.
GPC.
The product that was taken to the Kenya Bureau of Standards was SDL organic. I mean original, just SDL original. And the analytical report is available for what was in that particular product. So I do not, when you look at the two products, the ingredients of the two products are totally different. And we will conclude the whole issue after meeting the SBL Innovate.
Okay.
And after, of course, being able to understand how they got NCPB to distribute that particular fertilizer. That particular compound is not really a fertilizer.
So are they distributing it as part of the subsidy as fertilizer, or they are just using NCPB as an agent?
It is not part of the subsidized fertilizer. All the subsidized fertilizer are branded. The government subsidized fertilizer is branded, and the Mavuno product, which has been distributed widely through and procured by the government, has been credible. It has a correct ingredient. Therefore, this other particular product was just going alongside, but not promoted as one of the. Is not a subsidy fertilizer.
Okay, all right. And Dr. James Nyoro, talk to us about what is going on, because once upon a time, farmers would go to an agrovet or a shop or wherever it is that they want to buy their fertilizer, or even at cooperatives, and they would get their fertilizer home. They'd go and do the work that farmers do. Now we're getting to a situation that there are allegations of substandard or even fake. And the cabinet, the chairperson of the committee, Agriculture Committee at the National Assembly, brings us the question of one of the manufacturers, is it a packer of the fertilizer? What has this come to?
Well, Sam, first of all, let me say hi to John. We've worked together for a long time, and I'm happy to see him being the chair of Agriculture Committee, because we lobbied for a lot of things in agriculture. And I know the position he's in, he can be able to make sure that we attain that. Let me also say that it is unfortunate, because last year was a climax of the success. With all the discussion that you may have, and with all the reservations that people may have, it was a success in terms of implementing the subsidy fertilizer. A good program, and I'll come back and talk about some of the shortcomings, but also good rains, and that led to the bumper harvest that we are having. There are several other African countries that are implementing subsidy programs, and each one of them are facing their own individual problems. But I don't think there is one that has faced the kind of problem that we are currently facing. So I think coming in at a point where we had a very successful launch, and now farmers are starting to lose the credibility of that program, is really, really unfortunate. And once a farmer loses the credibility of an input, I will not talk about anything else, or a breed, if it is a cow, it will be very, very difficult to change that farmer. It's also important, and I'm sure my colleagues and John knows, that the fertilizer market in Kenya has undergone through a lot of transformation, a lot of change, and it is good to reflect on that. About 10, 15 years ago, every farmer in North Rift would know the color of DAP. They would say, this is DAP. If you give them CAN, they would know the color of CAN. And, we got to a point as a country where, because of so much use of those fertilizers, straight fertilizers, the DAPs, the CANs, the TSPs, and all of that, our soils became very acidic, which meant that if we continued using DAP fertilizer as it was, or CAN fertilizer as it was, there was no increase in yields because our soils are acidic, and they were not taking up the nutrients, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. And therefore, we've worked all of this for quite some time with the president when he was deputy. Remember, that was when actually Baraka, which is Toyota Tucson, came into being. At that point, we saw that we needed to do something on our soils. Mm-hmm. And you remember there was a lot of discussion on soil testing, which fertilizer is for which area. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that came out innovatively in Kenya through a company called River Mining is fertilizer blending. Now, fertilizer blending means that you still have your DAP, but in addition, you put rime. Mm-hmm. And you put micronutrients, just like, in a human being, you would require micronutrients. Now, the purpose of the rime is to improve the alkalinity of the soil, reduce the acidity, and then the other nutrients will be taken up. Now, that came in through a process of blending. And the first fertilizer to be blended was Mavuno fertilizer, which John has talked about. Thereafter, other companies came in and they started blending fertilizers. I think we have about 6 or 7 companies that are blending fertilizer today. So it is important to understand, when you are blending fertilizer, you cannot just come from nowhere and put in a machinery or a system that will blend fertilizer, because you blend it and granulate it into the small grains that will dissolve into the soils. Mm-hmm. So some are very successful. Some companies are very successful in preparation of the blends, and they are very well-known blends. In the process, there are certain other companies that were not very well equipped in blending that now sees that the whole thing has shifted to blending fertilizer, and they would want to come into blending fertilizer with all kinds of things. And therefore, this is the kind of thing that we are saying. So the question that you want to ask is, for me, it was a great plus for government to do the census, to list the farmers, because for the first time, the country did not know how many farmers were there. It was also a great achievement for the government to issue the vouchers, mm-hmm. so that you can go and redeem the voucher. But for me, the biggest misgiving that I have is to make NCPB the center where you go and redeem your voucher and get fertilizer. That has always been the problem, because historically, and I'm hoping that John will agree with me, because we have written a lot of papers on the role of NCPB. Mm-hmm. Historically, NCPB has never performed its role for which it was created. And we can go and look at the Act. It was created so that it can be the buyer and seller of last resource. So they'll be buying from the market when there is a surplus, and they'll be selling to the meters when there is a deficit.
Right.
They were also supposed to guarantee the price. You keep on hearing about minimum guarantee. So essentially, mm-hmm. the role for which NCPB was created and distributed even into the country was just to manage our national strategic reserves, and also, do the price stabilization. For the record, and you can go into, AI and Google all the papers that are written on NCPB. NCPB never achieved its objective. Why? Because of political interference.
But now it's...
Now, it was added another function of distributing fertilizers. It was not added because it was successful in the function for which it was started. It was added because it is convenient. You have almost an NCPB store in almost every maybe sub-county or some in wards. Because of convenience, they were given that role. But by being given that role, there's something else that happened. You killed the agro-dealers. You have talked about farmers used to wake up and they know, if I go to Sam's agro-dealer, I trust him because he brings in the right seed, he brings in the right fertilizer, I'll buy it from Sam, that fertilizer. Mm. Now, by moving the fertilizer away from agro-dealers, and you're talking about over 40% of the fertilizer consumption in Kenya, because our national consumption is 180 or 170 something, and this subsidy fertilizer is about 70.
180 what?
180,000 tons.
Okay.
So 70,000 tons is the subsidy. So it's a substantial amount, and particularly for cereals. So what you've done is you've cured the agro-dealers. There are about 10,000 agro-dealers in this country. 30% of them are women. They have been trained. So essentially what you are doing is you, as a farmer, and I'll give you an analogy of a butchery. Mm-hmm. If you go to the Great Corner here, and you buy meat, and the guy decides to sell you some rotten meat inside, you never go back to that butchery. And you tell your friends never to go back. You go to another butchery that is selling good quality. It is the same with inputs. The farmers will always know that so-and-so's agro-dealer is the best. Okay. They have good quality and they have whatever. So this whole issue has also, let me have one more point and then I'll stop, has also been mixed, and I'm hoping that the National Assembly, I see there was an act, a Fertilizer Animal Feedstuff Act that was being developed. Organic and inorganic fertilizer has been mixed, some. Inorganic fertilizer is fertilizer that has been formulated. It is like Cafenol, it is like Panadol. You know the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and K. And therefore, if you doubt that this fertilizer is not the subsidy fertilizer, what do? Kefe should be there the following day. Caro should be there the following day. They take samples, they take them to the lab, they analyze, and they say, indeed, it is not NPK. Our analysis doesn't show. But now there are a few other guys who have come in with organic fertilizer. Organic fertilizer is manure, basically. Mm-hmm. Or some are doing, they injected to become more available and more whatever. So does our rules and regulations, including the National Assembly, differentiate between somebody who is distributing organic fertilizer, which is manure, which you can do in your house, because if you have a lot of buses, you can put manure into bags and sell. That is opposite of NPK or the blended fertilizer that we are talking about.
Right, okay. And we'll get more from that. But Geoffrey Wandeto, are there concerns in your county? Because when this subsidized fertilizer program started, farmers were delighted that finally we were going to afford it based on what had been the price before then. But where do you find the truth? Because you've seen images of farmers displaying fertilizer that they say it's not dissolving in water like it used to. I do not even know whether it's supposed to dissolve all the time. We'll get from the expert here. But what concerns are you hearing, and what should you be doing with them?
Okay, Sam, maybe to start, let me say that if you look at the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, food and agriculture and food security was one of the key pillars. And I agree with Dr. here that if there is something that the government has been successful at, out of all the things that is promised, because some of them are still work in progress, it has been basically improving agricultural output. And the subsidized fertilizer, and obviously coupled with the favorable weather that we have seen the last 2 years, have been a major catalyst in achieving the food security that we enjoy today. And it's important to note that we had come from a season when, farmers had a failed harvest for almost 3 years, and now we are now almost like in the second or third year of very good rains and very good harvest, which some is starting now to show itself in terms of food prices, cost of living, food inflation has come down, and obviously this is very, very good, for economic development. It's very good for the nutritional effect and all that. You've asked me if there are concerns coming from where I come from. Yes, I think yesterday I saw images of what is claimed to have been fake fertilizer. I think this was picked at I think an NCPB depot in Karatina. We are yet to verify that. We've agreed with a few of our members of parliament from Nyeri that indeed this morning we will be going on a fact-finding mission. So that is going on just to ascertain. But But like you, what we have seen more have been these media images showing farmers claiming there's goat manure, there are stones, there is sand, there is all that. And I think all those images are, some without, because sometimes here we want to do a lot of investigations. I don't think all these farmers are lying. Clearly something is amiss. I don't think we require any expertise. You cannot have all these farmers, from across the country, all of them claiming that they have picked something that is amiss, and then we are out here in the media denying, that there is no existence of a fake fertilizer. The truth of the matter is, I think some unscrupulous dealers have found their way into the value chain. I'm happy what my chairman, Dr. Mutunga, has explained, that a lot of what we are seeing here may not be fertilizer that is coming from the government, subsidy program. But NCPB also stocks other fertilizers for many other distributors that they have agreed with. And it's very, very unfortunate. I think a number of people have failed us. And it's just fair that we call them out here, loud and clear. I think one of the institutions that have failed us here has been KEBS, because it's one thing for a company to submit a sample. And Dr. will tell you here that people are very good at when they are submitting samples to KEBS. They submit the right thing. Until now, they move into full term, into full production, and that is where adulteration starts. So there has to be on continuous surveillance of the products in the market. And what we should be expecting to see is KEBS moving into full swing, collecting all these samples, visiting all these farmers, analyzing them, okay? So it is very, very important that KEBS, rises to the occasion as far as this issue is concerned. Number two, it's NCPB. How did it get into contract with all these shadowy, characters who are packing, some SAD into bags, from Kariandusi, people who are packing stones, people who are packing goat manure. And I like the education that Dr. has given us here between, the synthetic fertilizers, the inorganic and the organic. I mean, if it is then goat manure, it should be sold as goat. We buy goat manure all the time, but that is packaged on the roadside. The people who plant flowers, if you want some manure for your flowers at home or whatever, it is still used. But it cannot be packed and put in an NCPB bag and claimed there to be, NPK 17 or whatever it is, when indeed the item that is inside there is not the right thing. Okay. I think the other person who has to take responsibility are the people in the executive in charge of this. We have a PS in charge of agriculture. He has to tell us how we found ourselves, into this. And I agree with the people who are saying that heads must roll. This is indeed economic sabotage. This is indeed a serious crime, because I looked at those farmers who have, bought that fertilizer and have gone out there, applied it in their farms. This was their source of income. I mean, this is how they hope to make, their livelihoods. And then you have sabotaged them, by selling them stones and other things. So it is not as light a matter as people are putting it. And sometimes the denial is not helping. What we should be able to see its full action and restoring confidence. Dr. here has said that we do not want our farmers to run away from NCPB, because a farmer may not now know which is the right fertilizer and which is the wrong fertilizer. I know the government subsidized fertilizer is correct, is the right one. But what we are having is all these people, getting in and doing this.
I hear you and saying who should take responsibility, but I take note that the Agriculture Ministry only spot the Principal Secretary, who wrote a letter, I think it was sometime last week, and let me just get the date. Yes, it was on the 20th of March, 2024. And he says that following a sport visit by ministry staff led by the PS to counties and National Cereals and Produce Board stores, it was established that the above fertilizer, in this case, NPK 10-26-10, manufactured by Kel Chemical Limited, well, the letter says Ken Chemical Limited. I think it's KL.
KL.
Yes, KL Chemicals, Chemical Limited. It was established that the above fertilizer being distributed under subsidy program may not be meeting the required standards as earlier indicated. Your institution is requested to suspend the distribution of this fertilizer with immediate effect from being issued to farmers. Additionally, you are required to carry out an investigation to ascertain the specifications of this fertilizer before being reintroduced in the program. In the event the fertilizer is found not to be meeting specifications, the supplier will be penalized and meet a full cost. So that's what the letter says. So it says two things that are confusing. That first of all, it has been determined that the fertilizer does not meet the standards. Yet goes again to say NCPB go ahead and conduct investigations to find the specifications, and if it's found that the specifications are wrong, the manufacturer will be penalized. So I mean, you can't do both things.
So some two things there. You know, it says they went with some ministry officials. What testing was done? Because determining some of the things that Dr. here has explained, including the percentages of the micronutrients that are available, if it is, say, NPK 17, Dr. can explain to us what that means in terms of the content of nitrogen, of potassium, and of K. You know, there has to be some technical people doing this. But I think when you have a crisis like this one, what is the first thing you do? I think the first thing you do is to recall all the fertilizer that was given out by this company. So what NCPB should be doing is, if we have determined that this company could be the suspect company, that fertilizer either should be put aside and not sold, or it should be recalled, all of it back. But I think we should also allow farmers who may have fallen victim to this fake fertilizer to be allowed to take it back to the nearest NCPB store, get a cash back, or get an appropriate replacement. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Mutunga, so when you watch this, that the peers may be communicating what he has, but the Cabinet Secretary has been busy at different fora saying that the fertilizer we have is quality. In fact, on the eve of Good Friday, a statement came out encouraging farmers to continue going to the NCPB stores and collecting the fertilizer. And probably it's the right thing to do. But then again, what do you do to communicate in such a situation that is becoming a crisis?
Thank you very much, Sam, and my colleague there, and my long-standing friend, Nyoro. Nyoro, we worked with them for very many years. Now, one thing that we need to be very careful about is what we tell Kenyans, especially at this point in time, because they don't have a lot of time to make a decision. They need to buy fertilizer to plant if they have not yet planted. So the first thing that our government does, let me be very practical here, is to take the samples and analyze and approve these samples good for use by the Kenyan farmers or for any consumer. Any consumer good must be verified for quality purposes. Now, when it comes to what the fertilizer that NCPB has been distributing, government always brands its fertilizer. The subsidy is branded. Currently, Nafaka is being distributed last year and part of this year. And Nafaka, the product itself is known. Whatever is inside the packet of Nafaka is known, and therefore it gives the farmer the correct ingredient. NPK, or nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, is basically what is required to plant. And you need more of potassium or phosphorus because it is used for root development. That is the reason why we need like 46%. I mean, like when we have NPK packet branded 18460, it means it has 18% of nitrogen, 46% of potassium, which is for root development. Then later on, you come with CAN, which has a lot more of nitrogen for vegetative growth. That's how fertilizer goes. Now, when people decide to do fertilizer, there is this assumption that they are also correcting or trying to attend to the soil changes, as Nyoro did allude to. When you use NPK for a long time, you end up now changing the soil pH. And when the pH changes, it needs to be corrected for the crops to grow as they could have done before. Now, several things. Number one, when the PS goes to NCPB and says this fertilizer is not correct for distribution, for planting, he must be referring to the fact that we probably need more than phosphorus than there is in this particular fertilizer, because if it is 10, 26, 10, it means it has less of phosphorus than it is probably required. But the question is, had it been approved in the listing of categories of fertilizers that are supposed to be distributed in this country? Was it approved? Did it go through the approval process? If it has not gone, if they are not gone through the approval process, who is to blame? There must be somebody, there must be a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper in this particular case always, and in most cases, is KEBS. Did KEBS test this fertilizer and find it useful to the Kenyan farmers? Did the ministry also approve? Because the ministry has the data. They have the entire national research system, which basically determines what kind of fertilizer is supposed to be used in which part of the country. There is a lab called the National Agricultural Laboratories, which is supposed to be sampling soils and testing for regions and giving indicative, requirements in terms of the soil nutrient levels at any one particular point in time. And that can be used basically for packaging fertilizers, and that is what informed the blending that has happened in this country. Last year, 17 was given, and I think it gave quite some good yields. So the fertilizer itself must meet the minimum quality requirements. The second thing that I would like to mention is trust with the NCPB and why use the NCPB. I would imagine, not really, I'm very sure I was not part of the decision to use NCPB, but I would imagine that it would be very complicated for the government to use agro dealers for the subsidy. The subsidy formula must be configured completely to be able to use the agro dealers. First of all, you enlarge the scope of the actors. If the actors are too many, and you can see how unscrupulous actors are coming up and trying to gain to get an extra coin by cheating Kenyans. If you open up too much, then you can easily not know what product the Kenyan government is giving out. So interventions must be thought through. If it is an intervention to bring the prices down, probably we might need to consider reducing the cost of the duty, maybe intervening at the duty level, intervening at any other level, so that agro dealers cannot be free to use the subsidy, to distribute the subsidy. However, even if they are free to distribute the subsidy, there must be a surveillance mechanism to ensure that whatever is being distributed is a correct product. The second issue that's also very important to look at is why use NCPB? I tend to think that the government uses NCPB because it has an elaborate infrastructure across the country. NCPB was basically established for grain management. Where we do not have a grain produced, then we have stores for consumption. So the production areas, we offload the grain from the production areas to the consumption areas. But we realize that infrastructure was put up with a lot of investment, and it is barely in use. That's one of the things that we need to consider. It is actually available, and let me say even available for letting. So we need to use this infrastructure. So the infrastructure is available. It's a government-controlled infrastructure. Then it can be used for government, subsidy, which I think has worked very well for last year, and we had a bump harvest. But going forward, we need to control what goes through this elaborate network. Yeah. I think that is a problem could be. Who allows what to go through the NCPB system? It is not just KEBS that needs to be blamed here. We need to ask NCPB clearly what happened. How come you are being found in circumstances where you are distributing the wrong product? When we are saying NCPB should even go further and open up satellite centers to bring fertilizer closer to the people to reduce on the cost of transportation. So there are issues in NCPB that also need to be looked at. And that is why we are considering meeting NCPB as it were and meeting ministry officials separately so that they can be able to do exactly what.
And as you plan that meeting, because you're the oversight house responsible for matters agriculture, and the cabinet secretary has been saying that there is no problem. I mean, where is the question of accountability at a time that it is actually possible to establish the facts as fast as possible? To date, that letter was written on the 20th of March, but it's 2nd of April. Close to 2 weeks later, we don't have the facts from the government.
The most important thing here is that we shall invite the PS and the cabinet secretary The government health secretary will give us the basis upon which he tells Kenyans that the fertilizer is of good quality, and the PS will give us the background of his suspicion that the fertilizer does not mean the quality. So when we meet the two, we will be able to know exactly what is happening. But I would like to say that the ministry should be speaking from the same source with the same voice. I think that doublespeak is something that is of concern to us as a committee, and we shall establish exactly what is happening.
Okay. All right. So, Dr. Nyoro, you described that in some interesting terms that those that are blending also need to granuate. I've never heard that word. This is the first time I'm hearing it, but I'm sure it talks about granules. So some farmers have been saying that their fertilizer has granules that look like rocks. Others are saying the color is darker than what they're used to. Others are saying that when they put it in water, it is not dissolving as it used to. Please explain to us, when you're looking at fertilizer, especially if it's the planting fertilizer, how should it look like and how should it behave, knowing that you just said that blending has been happening and a few things may be changing in texture and the look of the fertilizer?
Okay, before I do that, let me comment on two issues that Dr. Ali has raised.
Yep.
I think we are all agreeing that somebody has dropped the ball. First of all, if you are running an organization of the size and shape of NCPB, you must have some quality control. When a product is entering into a store, you should be able to know what quality, what is the content, what is the quality of the substance that is entering your store. That obviously in the olden days used to be managed by cards. So that is the first one. The second one, and I'm sure Dr. Ali knows, is that even when I was Governor Kiambu, because I bought subsidized fertilizer for my farmers, but that time we were buying through KNTC. Before buying a consignment, we used to ask KNTC to give us a sample, and we would take it to National Agricultural Laboratories, and they would analyze and tell us whether it is 1846 or whatever 0 or 17. And once they have confirmed, we would then order the consignment. In other words, there is a quality control mechanism that is inbuilt into the system. The farmers may not actually get the samples so that they know it is correct, but the organizations that are representing farmers and KEPS actually came out and they were the first one to blow the whistle on this. There is the National Agricultural Laboratories. There are private laboratories that are doing analysis. So I am wondering really how an inferior product can get into a store. And going back to our discussion with John on whether or not we should start to think about using agro-dealers or not, I think the case for pharmaceutical products is there. I think we have some of the best pharmaceutical outlets in this country, better than even being in Nairobi Hospital. And what there is that you designate, you don't give everybody, you designate certain agro-dealers because you also encourage investment in that area. And then what the farmer will do is that you receive your voucher, the normal way that you receive, whether through USSD or through smartphone, and you go to the agro-dealer, you will pay the balance, you leave the voucher with the agro-dealer, and then the agro-dealer will go to either KCB or NBK or whatever it is to redeem the amount that was for subsidy. This can be done, and it can be done as a pilot. Because basically what you are saying, and I'm worried when I hear John say we want to open satellite stations for more. I know it's reaching the farmer, but I think we also have to pause and ask ourselves whether we need to build capacity if it has not been there, or what we need to do. Now, back to your question. Farmers have used fertilizer. If you go to North Rift, where fertilizer has been used for the longest, or even Central Kenya in coffee, farmers have used fertilizer to the extent that they know what the smell they know the color. In fact, John and Geoffrey here will tell you, when we shifted from the traditional DAP, which was of a particular color, and because of the blending that we have talked about, it was blended, it changed the color a bit. The farmers said, no, we are not taking that fertilizer. We don't know it. It is not the color that we know. There was to be a bit of education, for the farmers to be told there is rime in this fertilizer, which was not there. It will, there was to be some education. So farmers actually know the color, the smell of their fertilizer. I'm impressed. All the farmers should be awarded an honorary degree, PhD, that they know that the way to test the fertilizer is to put it to dissolve it in water. Now, what happens when you plant a fertilizer, when you plant maize with fertilizer? That is when we are told you can do a dry planting or you can plant after the rains. It is the rains that dissolve the fertilizer so that it is available to be uptaken by the roots. Yes. So farmers know if you have a substance that cannot dissolve, then it's not fertilizer, it's something else. So you can see the level of the intelligence and the ability of our farmers not to be cheated. But then the problem is when they have credibilities on certain organizations. Right. So you have credibility on you, Sam. Sometimes I assume that what you tell me is right. Okay? Now that credibility is kind of dropping, and I have to agree with John and Geoffrey here that we need to solve this problem quickly, very quickly. The rains.
Just before we move away from that point, so any fertilizer that you buy from the shop, you put it in water, it should dissolve.
It should dissolve.
Immediately.
If it doesn't, well, it dissolves slowly. If you leave it for overnight or for whatever, if you look at that fertilizer there, if you leave it, it will eventually dissolve. Now, there are some materials that are called carrier material. Okay? Any substance like fertilizer has carrier material. That carrier material may not dissolve. Okay? But it should be the minimum.
I'm asking that because there's an argument that there's certain fertilizer that you put it in the soil, it's supposed to serve the plant for some time, so the dissolving is gradual, it's not immediate.
It is true.
How do you explain that to a farmer who is putting it in water and waiting for it to dissolve as they...
I think the farmers have not been waiting for 100%, for the fertilizer to dissolve 100% like salt. I think what they have been doing is to do, you saw it, in the news that one was brackish and it was not dissolving. The other one was kind of whitish and it was dissolving a bit. They are not looking at 100% dissolution, okay? It's not salt, it's not sugar. It takes, in fact, the longer the fertilizer takes in the soil, okay, in terms of releasing the nutrients, the better. But ultimately, that fertilizer, 95 or whatever % must dissolve except the carrier material that is in that bag.
Okay. Yes, Honorable Wandeto.
And some, I think, asking the farmers, farmers are doing their own rudimentary tests to the best of their knowledge. And some of the issues that they've shown, including rocks, I don't think we should put the burden of proof on the farmers. I think it would be wrong. The burden of proof lies somewhere else. I think the farmers have just raised suspicion. They basically just raised an alarm. It is for the rest of us to come and do what is the right thing, for the farmer. Trying to deny what the chairman talked about, the double speak, I don't think it is helping. The rains have started. Farmers now, we do not want to put any doubts in them. We had a very, two successful planting seasons using the government subsidized fertilizer. We have seen the results of that. We would not want to get into to compromise this third cycle. And luckily, God has given us, and again, very good rains this year. So why compromise that opportunity through this?
In fact, Sam, I just wanted to add, before you stop me on that, that the rainy season is with us. I think the prediction that I had, last night was that this week there is going to be a major, the downpour in the central highlands. And you know, a scientist will tell you, if you delay planting by 3 days, that's why you have farmers do dry planting. They know the rains may come in 3-4 days' time, they plant now. Because if you delay planting in 4 days after the rains have come, scientists say you will suffer about 40 to 45% yield loss. Because that initial moisture that comes in is so important to the seed. And therefore, the importance of bringing back credibility, the importance of making sure that the farmers who have been given this kind of fertilizer somehow are paid back and they get the proper fertilizer.
Right.
The whole aspect of building back goodwill. And then one final thing is, John, you are going to do a postmortem, because I would say an parliamentary committee, I really respect it, because it does a fantastic job. You are going to do a postmortem. But the question will be, what is this that you are going to put in place to avoid another postmortem? Because a postmortem is a postmortem. What are you going to do to ensure that such a situation does not arise? And it is true that the subsidy fertilizer may not be the one adulterated, but it's also true, to be honest, John, that some of the fertilizers come in raw form, and that's what I'm saying. Some of the companies have installed capacity to be able to blend and then granulate and then label it subsidy fertilizer. So you have to bring back that confidence, but you are doing a postmortem.
Okay, all right. I don't know what you have to say about that, Dr. John Mutunga, because I also want us to talk a little bit about the pricing of commodities in the country, because once upon a time, price of unga was at about 230 shillings or thereabout. It has been dropping gradually, but if challenges such as this continue, are we risking finding ourselves to the cost of food where it was? How do we make sure that we can sustain continued dropping of prices in a manner that Kenyans are able to afford?
Thank you very much. Let me say that yes. First of all, the dissolution aspect of a fertilizer is true. It dissolves, but gradually, because it's supposed to be available for the plant. Availability has to do with slow dissolution, because it can only be taken in a soluble form. The second issue that I would like to mention is that the fertilizer is blended with what we call filler material, and with material that is supposed to restrict it from fast dissolution.
Yeah. So
it is a compound, it's a combination. Now, the other issue that you brought up, which is important, is postmortem. Postmortem, we do postmortem even if we know somebody has died of an accident, because we want to know, how did this person die? Which organ collapsed first? What was the first issue that led to the cause of death? And in the event that, in the current circumstance, we are doing a study that will inform the decisions in the future. Decisions in the extent to which we can use government institutions and trust them to do the distribution of fertilizer, for instance, if they are meant for another, like NCPB. We are going to also make decisions into the timeliness of importation of this fertilizer, the ordering aspect of it, the quality issues, how the quality control mechanism is handled across the country, and what can we inform the government to do in view of quality assurance. And we should also be looking at how can we configure the entire subsidy, which is the best mechanism to configure this subsidy, so that we may be able to assist the Kenyan farmer. We realize that subsidy comes in to lower the cost of production. And when the cost of production is down, the cost of food goes down. And I think this ushers in the issue that that Sam wants to bring in terms of reduction of the cost of food. I actually have seen some let me say social media reports indicating that we are even able to get a packet of unga at 95, 96 shillings today. But that tells you something. When we were doing the campaigns, we assured Kenyans that we shall give them what is called guaranteed minimum return. And guaranteed minimum return is almost happening in coffee now. where the government pronounced itself on the issue of paying 80 shillings per kilogram of shelley delivered. There has also been a clear attempt to have guaranteed minimum returns in milk, where we are talking about 50 shillings per kilo of milk delivered, irrespective of whether it is the lean or the pig production system. We are talking about guaranteed minimum return again in terms of macadamia, where we are talking about 100 shillings a kilo and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to maize production, and this is actually tricky, without proper harvesting and aggregation, especially for the smallholder who does not invest in housing, in storage, then we have these farmers themselves controlling the prices by creating temporary glut and driving down the prices to below the cost of production. And that becomes an issue. If a 2 kilogram bag of unga now is going at 95 shillings, I would imagine the miller must have bought that maize at around 25 shillings a kilo. And I can tell you for sure, we've been studying the maize subsidy program for 2022, and we've been able to know how the millers determine the costs. The millers load with 14% VAT. They also load around 15% of profit, and there is about 11% of the cost. So they have around 42% or 42% of the cost. So if you take 42% of 95 of the value, let me say, then you realize that you have around 45 shillings and 60 cents that is going to the cost per bag. If you take the difference, which is around, again, if you take 95 and remove that, and prorate backwards, you realize that they must have bought a kilo of maize at 24 shillings and 70 cents. Mm-hmm. That tells you why farmers have been disadvantaged to the extent of selling their maize at very low prices, which means even if we want to bring down the cost of unga, we must take care of the farmer, because the farmer must go back to the farm the following year so that we can continue having food security. We cannot talk about having food security when we appear to be exploiting the farm.
It is interesting that you should say that. I'm just wondering, then how do you balance all these questions? Because subsidized fertilizer was actually meant to achieve what is in the country at the moment, and these are taxpayers' money. It is the consumers that pay taxes so that that subsidy can be. But now when they're also coming on this, as I said, to consume, to buy the product, Chairman Mutunga is also talking about the farmers have to be protected. How do you balance that question in a manner that is sustainable for both the businesses but also for the consumers?
You know, Sam, what John is talking about and the question you are asking has never been solved clearly by economists. It is what is referred to as a food price dilemma. A food price dilemma is where the consumers want low price for their commodity. Mm-hmm. But the producers want high price for the commodity, for the same commodity. Mm-hmm. So as a government, how do you balance? And you remember, when we were young in school, there used to be a lot of cases for copper belt in Zambia, in terms of people demanding lower maize prices, and farmers were unable to produce. But the solution to that is an intervention such as the fertilizer subsidy. Now, you also have to consider, and this is something else I would urge John, empirical evidence in agriculture, I'm not so sure that it is available today. When we were at Tegemeo Institute, we came up with a finding that was very, very interesting, that 52%, say half, of the so-called farmers who at the harvest want to sell, that 52% actually buy more from the market than they sell. What does that mean? At the harvest, everybody is selling. Mm-hmm. So you sell 8 bags. But later on in the year, as a household, you buy back 15 bags. And you are a farmer, 52%. That includes farmers was in Gishu and other areas. And that statistic is a very, very important statistic. because it tells you if 52% are buying more than they are selling, then who is producing for consumers? And that is where the negotiation in this country should go, towards large-scale production. Because our small-scale production are not even producing for themselves. Okay? Only 48% are producing for themselves and producing for others. Mm-hmm. The second thing that that tells you is that at 52%, everybody should be happy with a raw maize price. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you buy more than you sell. So you can buy, you know, when you're selling, you want to claim to be given 6,000 shillings.
Right.
At the selling season. But without remembering that you will come back to the market and you buy at 6,000. So the farmers who are net buyers are actually better off with raw price. How do you achieve raw price, which makes both the consumer and the producer happy? Mm-hmm. It is through increased productivity.
Yeah. Okay.
If you have an acre, instead of getting 25 bags, you get 40. When you get 40, your cost of production comes down. Farmers are not after price, they are after income. Mm-hmm. But income, Y equal to Q times P. Okay? So if you can keep P down, price down, you can increase Q and you still have higher income. Right. And that is why the subsidy program is important. But remember, this was only the first year. Mm. Okay, the underlying problems are there. I think John has also raised what you call the role of limiting factors. The role of limiting factors means that if you remove one problem, another problem becomes important. Mm-hmm. What the government has done, and you know, you need to be congratulated, is to provide the subsidy, over 50% subsidy. But where is extension? Extension is in the hands of governors. Governors were given vehicles which were intended for extension from the national government. All the vehicles went to revenue collection. There is no extension going on. So farmers are, yes, getting this fertilizer, they are getting seeds. I think we probably have to talk about the quality of seeds and whether there is a rotation. But they don't know how to space it. They don't know specifically how you can get optimal input. Then you have the whole issue of post-harvest problems. Remember, towards the end of last year, the government had to dedicate some money to buy dryers, but they were buying dryers when it was already wet. So this is what I'm calling the role of the limiting factor. Okay. So we have to address food security wholesomely and not assume that by just doing one thing that you'll be able now to make the producers happy and the consumers happy.
Okay. All right. Now, I want to take feedback. Then I give you your final remark, Honorable Andeto, but also Dr. Mutunga. But as we get that, talk to me about, because apart from all these concerns that are being raised on prices and everything, there has also been concerns with farmers saying that the law that was passed in 2023, the Finance Act, and the questions that you saw members of Parliament, Edward Muriu and Shege, the Member of Parliament for Kandara, about e-teams and other matters. Where do we go from here? At a time the farmer is feeling, yes, I'm being assisted with subsidized fertilizer, but there's also so much demand coming from the taxman.
I think Dr. Ari has put it very, very, very well, Sam. And the whole issue of agriculture must be seen in a much more holistic issue. To be honest, subsidized fertilizer is one small part of a much larger equation that we need to address. And he's talked about extension services. I will probably add things like access to credit. Exactly. We have things like infrastructure. I'll tell you, like in my own constituency, Tetu, between ourselves and the people of Nyandarua, we've been clamoring for a road which I'm sure you have heard called Ihidhe-Donyojeru Road. And the whole thing has been farmers want access. We feel there's some things we can take to Nyandarua. There are things that Nyandarua can bring to us much more easily. So we need to look at all these things. The issue of quality, the issue of input, also remember it's not just fertilizer that is being adulterated. Also, let's know there's an issue of substandard seeds. There has been issue of substandard pesticides. There has been issue of even substandard tools to basically do the work. So there's a whole equation that here needs to be addressed. We also need to address this over-reliance on rain-fed agriculture. We've had good 2-3 seasons of good rain. We are not God. We cannot predict what happens in 2025, 2026. So how do we ensure that sustainably we deal, with the issue of farming? So there must be much more programs coming in. Daktari has raised the issue of extension services. To be honest, our counties can do better than what they are currently doing in terms of being able to, support the farmers, so that, long term we can be able to assure ourselves of food security. To support what Daktari has said, I always say that capital and labor best follow predictable returns. If tomorrow our farmers in North Rift and wherever, a bag of maize goes to 1,800, to be honest, they will scale down their production. So this whole issue of minimum guaranteed returns, or at least giving a farmer some return that is commensurate to his labor, but also increasing the productivity, which again, there has been studies done in coffee, in tea and everything, that the issue we are having in this country is low productivity per acre. When you go to the farmers in Nyandarua and you compare them with what farmers in Idaho, in the US are doing, farmers in Idaho are doing 5 times more potatoes, for the same acre of land. So how do we progressively increase productivity of our farmers, so that overall the cost per unit of production goes down? And that's the only way we can assure ourselves that we have we have cheap food. Sam, to finalize or to close this, there is a very interesting nexus that has been drawn globally between agricultural productivity and economic growth. It is important to know, like right now, countries like Bangladesh, where you can see the whole textile industry is moving. Bangladesh has some of the lowest food prices, which again determine lower wages, which again attracts foreign investment. So if we can keep food prices low, even wages, you can be able to keep wages fairly low, or the clamor for wage increases, because the biggest clamor for wage increases is food. Then, we can be able to be a much more competitive sector. So agriculture is not just about nutrition. It's got a big impact in terms of economic development.
Okay. Now, Dr. Mutunga, I have 0 time left, but I can give you 30 seconds in closing on especially the way forward about the issues that you just mentioned.
Thank you very much. I think I want to remind James what we used to do when we were agricultural extension officers and still young people working in the ministry. We used to have a farm management handbook which had both net and gross margins. Today, I don't think we speak that language, and that's where we need to go. First of all, we need to realize that smallholders do not have storage facilities. So even as we try to buy them dryers, let us try to look for some form of aggregation so that we can be able to even have a meeting point, and even price determination can make sense. The other issue that is very key is there are 2 gatekeepers who need to be very, very, very awake to the realities of the day, because you cannot be talking about counterfeits in the 21st century towards the end. I think we should be, KEFs and KEFIs need to be awake to make sure that we get the right product to the market. And then there is another authority called Anti-Counterfeit Authority. I have not heard much about them. They need to walk from one product store to another product store to make sure that Kenyans are consuming the right products. Otherwise, all said and done, agriculture is the mainstay of our economy, but I don't know whether we really give it the kind of support that we need to do in order to grow an economy, because the greatest proportion of our population is anchored in agriculture. And the day we realize that, we will invest wisely, invest in our people, and we shall grow this economy. Thank you.
And one hopes that time is now, that realization comes. And so much feedback coming to us via way of SMS as well as X. We'll not be looking at that. But Godri Baraza, you're saying that 2 ministries, health and agriculture, are doing a great disservice to the president. The CS for Health is unable to end the doctor strike, and her agriculture counterpart is just watching farmers purchasing pebbles instead of fertilizer. It is the feeling, and I hope that this show has helped you understand a little more about how fertilizer works, but also the concerns that are in the agriculture sector. We'll do more time because at the end of the day, solutions have to be found. Thank you so much, Dr. John Mutunga, the Chairman of Agriculture Committee, National Assembly, joining us from Dubai, Geoffrey Wandeto, Member of Parliament for Tetu constituency, and Dr. James Nyoro, agriculture expert and also former Governor of Kiambu County. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time. Up next is Matter Social.